Chapter 12. Explosive Showdown. Ears ringing, Danny struggles to look around and see through the thick cloud of dust and debris. Her right arm hurts badly, and she glances down to see a tree limb sticking out of her flesh, just above the elbow. Wincing, she snaps the ends off before pulling the obstruction out with a sharp scream of pain. Blood begins to pour out from the wound, but Danny presses her other hand against it firmly and whispers an incantation of healing. The words come out little more than whispers, but with the deafening ring in her ears, she cannot even hear the loudest of screams. The glow produced by her magic is faint, tied to her own level of wellness and energy. The blast very nearly killed her and has depleted almost all of her strength. Danny looks to her side, seeing the motionless form of Apprentice Urvashi Nobili. The dust obscures the upper half of her body, until Danny realizes that there is no upper half. She whispers a string of inaudible curses, wishing she had been just a bit faster, or that her barrier had been wider, or that she had the strength to maintain it to protect her new friends. She regrets that she did not know or have the opportunity to learn a single thing about her teammate. "Are you injured?" Master Hironda asks, the ringing beginning to subside long enough for her to make out the question. Danny nods slowly, then her eyes return to the mangled remains of Urvashi. "We can mourn our dead later. First we must regroup before falling into any further snares." Master Hironda holds back his personal anger at having led his young team into such a vicious trap. As a mission leader, his only two duties were to maintain the safety of his team and ensure that their objective is completed. With his first duty now unachievable, he must now focus solely on bringing an end to the rogue magician by any means necessary. "Master, can you see any other survivors?" Danny asks, her own senses dulled by the lingering magic released by the explosion. "Master Fordron is the only other person I can clearly sense. There are others, but they're faint and I cannot discern who they are, or if they're injured." "Master Fordron appears to be unharmed, completely." Master Hironda lets his final words hang in the air for a moment, as he questions the strange nature of them. Despite walking into the trap the same as everyone else, how was Fordron able to so quickly erect a barrier and judge the strength needed to sustain it without so much as a scratch? The suspicions about the leader of the Blackwing Society abound among the other masters, yet few have gone so far as to suggest a direct implication in the crimes of the rogue magicians, Adrian Scrimauer and Elian Schaefer. Only with a prior knowledge of the attack could Fordron have created a perfect reaction and defense. The two of them make their way to the man in question, who quickly throws a hand up in warning as soon as they are visible. "Don't move," Fordron says. "More of the explosive orbs have been buried as landmines. They're all around us." Danny scans the area, seeing nothing out of the ordinary. To Master Fordron, however, the ground is decorated with spots of brightly glowing light radiating out from the earth. Beside the Master, Drahele and Abbott stand looking to be in just as good of condition as he. As if reading her thoughts, Drahele begins to speak. "Master Fordron sensed the orbs coming before the first one exploded. He was able to raise a barrier around all three of us." "He saved our lives," Abbott says, indebted to the Master. Her bright eyes sparkle with pure devotion. She would now lay down her life for Fordron if he were to ask. Danny wonders if that is how all of the Blackwings see their Master. They all appear to be extremely loyal and follow his instructions without pause. "Provost Katz was too far ahead of me and too close to the initial explosion." Fordron grinds his teeth in anger. "There was nothing I could do for him." "What about Keith or Sen?" Abbott asks, frightened of the answer. Fordron shakes his head. "I do not sense them and did not have time to see what happened to them. If they were unable to erect barriers in time, I fear that they are dead." "This is too much," Abbott says, freaking out. "He's slaughtering us, and we can't do anything to stop him. I don't want to die. I don't want any of you to die." "Calm yourself, child," Fordron says. "We're far from helpless or defeated. Skirmire has hit us with sneaky and underhanded traps. When we face him directly, we will make him pay for all the suffering that he has inflicted. It's likely that the rogue has more traps in store for us. We must do everything we can not to fall into any more of his snares, Hironda says. With so many layers of traps and deception, it is clear that Skirmire fears facing us directly, Fordron says, judging their enemy's tactics. He's skilled, but I had serious doubts he was capable of besting someone as strong as Master Nando in a duel. The teams before us likely fell to his traps and never had the chance to reach their target, Master Hironda adds, agreeing with Fordron's conclusion. Or they were so wounded and disorganized that they were easily picked off, Fordron finishes. It fits, though. If most of his team were eliminated and raised as puppets, Nando would have been too shocked and outraged to properly respond. Not even he could best the Saints in that condition. Danny's respect for the highly distrusted master begins to grow. Under pressure, he maintains a rational and calm demeanor. He's able to think quickly and problem-solve situations in which others are unable. The master's analytical skills and powers of deduction are far above those of any person she's ever met. Briefly, she considers what it would be like to be Master Fordron's apprentice rather than Master Dioda's. She feels guilty at having these thoughts and pushes them aside. Fordron seems to see Danny's shy admiration and smiles, filing it away for later use. We cannot proceed until we are sure that we are not going to trigger any further explosions from merely walking forward, Fordron says. Chua, would you please erect a protective barrier to shield everyone? Drahele nods, urging everyone to step back and move closer together before he concentrates on raising a bubble of protective magic around them. Satisfied, Fordron's body erupts into dozens of loudly cawing crows. Each bird is able to sense the locations of the explosive orbs below the ground and dive into them to set off a chain of massive blasts. Brilliant flashes of light strobe the area, and a powerful shockwave crashes into Drahele's barrier, causing him to stumble. Abbott puts a hand on his back, adding her own strength to his to make sure the barrier holds. The crows absorb the majority of each orb's blast, negating them through some unspoken spell of Fordron's creation. The surviving crows flock back together, reforming the Master Magician. Fordron's chest heaves with exhaustion, and his body is littered with deep bleeding wounds and severe burns. More than ever, the apprentices are left in awe of the sheer power and ingenuity of Taurus Fordron. As soon as Drahele releases his barrier and drops to his knees in fatigue, Abbott runs to the Master's side and uses her remaining reserves of magical energy to cast a Duquesne Holez spell of healing upon him. Thank you, Fordron says with a half-smile, kneeling as Abbott directs her healing energies through her palms and into his body through his chest. Abbott tries not to blush or dwell on the butterflies in the pit of her stomach as her hands push against the Master's granite-like pectorals. Even Danny is surprised that the Master is so physically fit despite his graying hair and status of more of a teacher than a warrior. Danny hears coughing and runs over to the sound. Underneath the debris of mangled trees, she finds the injured form of Panza. A thick tree limb protrudes from their abdomen. Hold on, Danny whispers, holding the mage's head up. Panza's normally chocolate skin is now grayed, and the color frightens Danny more than the blood that lies splattered all around. It looks like I will be returning home soon, after all. Panza smiles, teeth stained red. Hush, don't talk. Master Fordron! Master Hironda! Danny screams. I really did want to be able to teach the people of my town that magic's not evil. When my body is taken back, will you tell my parents about all the good of Endelgian? Now in tears, Danny nods. Yeah, of course I will. Master Hironda runs over to them, but he's too late. Danny looks up at him with a red and tear-stricken face. Apprentice Sen Panza's head lies rolled to the side, their eyes staring where none of the living can see. Damn him, Master Hironda growls, balling his fists in anger. It was not supposed to go this way. Master Fordron approaches, followed by Abbot and Drahele. We must use our anger and direct it where it belongs. What now, Master? Drahele asks, still out of breath and sweating heavily from his barrier spell. We proceed to Scrimmaur's hole and pull him out of it, whether it be screaming or silent, Fordron replies. After so many casualties, none of the elders will chastise the master for leaving Scrimmaur a messy stain on the floor, instead of bringing him in alive as originally planned. He's cut our numbers by half and outsmarted us at every turn, Danny says. Do you really think our best option is to continue? We owe it to our fallen comrades to see this mission through to its end. Fordron casts a quick spell, restoring his torn cloak, and stands back up. Besides, Scrimmaur is sure to have heard the detonations or felt their blasts. He likely thinks we're all dead. This is our best opportunity to turn the tables on him and catch him off guard for once. Master Fordron is correct. As far as we know, Master Seme's stealth team is still undetected. If we manage to bring down Scrimmaur's defenses, the stealth team should be more than capable of taking the rogue out. Provost Fisher and Javad awaken with their mouths covered with rope and cloth. Their wrists and ankles are bound so tightly that their skin is cut and bleeding. Neither can remember how they got in this dark room or who it was that bound them. The last memory either has is the massive explosion and a brilliant light. Fisher faintly recalls calling forth the symbols in his mind to erect a barrier spell, but cannot remember whether he managed to successfully utter the words or not. Ah, you're awake, Scrimmaur says, approaching them, with a pan of warm water and a wash rag. He begins to dab the wounds on Javad's forehead with the rag, rather than use any healing magic. I'm surprised you managed to get even a partial barrier up in time. Your teammates weren't so lucky. Fisher is at once relieved he called up enough of the barrier to save the two of them, and angered at the news that the others were not so fortunate. I can't move, Javad says through gritted teeth. Scrimmaur turns, looking at her with a smile. The malice in the rogue's eyes is frightening, and Javad is stricken with terror. Yes, you can. Just not through your own will. The glowing tendrils of energy linking the provost to Scrimmaur's hand becomes visible as he begins to make her dance. Like a true marionette, the provost's movement is clumsy and unnatural. Let us go, you maniac! Provost Fisher shouts. Scrimmaur causes Javad to strike her companion across the face. A single line of blood runs down his nose, but he remains glaring at the rogue with hatred. Fisher, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to do that. He's making me move, Javad cries out with shame and fear. I know, Fisher whispers. He's using puppet magic. It's a forbidden curse art. Did you learn that from the book you stole? You came prepared, Scrimmaur says, impressed that the provost is up to speed with the rogue's past actions and the potential contents of the book. But the book in my possession is solely for the summoning and control of the saints. I learned puppetry all on my own, he adds, giving them an arrogant bow. You didn't invent that magic. You had to learn it from somewhere. What other dark books do you have? How perceptive of you. I do possess a copy of Magica Marionetta. Master Henson is said to have created hundreds of cursed spells. Fear creeps into Javad's voice. How did you find a copy of that? I've made useful friends down here in the real world, while you and your fellows remained up in Endelgian, playing Dungeons and Dragons. You won't get away with this. Master Fordron will stop you. He's too strong for you to defeat, even if you use both of us against him, Fisher says passionately. Idiot, Javad shouts. Keep your mouth shut. It's quite all right, dear, Scrimmaur says, patting Javad on the forehead. I am already fully aware of your team of scrappy would-be heroes. My eyes are everywhere in this swamp. Master Forgeron, Master Hironda. Hell, I could even name the other provosts and apprentices if you'd like. Though, to be fair, there aren't many of you left. My traps seem to have killed most of your friends. Don't listen to him. He's trying to get under our skin, Javad orders her companion. Oh, I'm very much already under your skin, Scrimar says, causing Javad to pinch her own arm until the flesh bruises. The provost flinches with pain, trying but unable to stop herself. Your allies are falling like flies. I suppose I set my traps up too well. I had hoped for more puppets, but what can you do? He asks with a shrug. What's your plan? What do you stand to gain from all of this? Oh, I'm merely defending myself from Endelgian's repeated attacks. If your people would stop coming after me, I would stop killing them. Do you think I sought out Master Nando or his team to kill? No, they came after me. I had no other choice but to defend myself. In the end, it would be less painful for you if you had allowed them to capture you. Master Forgeron will not be as gentle, Fisher threatens. Painful for me? Scrimar laughs. No one's managed to lay a hand on me yet. What is Master Forgeron going to be able to do that I've not already seen? Fisher remains determined of his opinion. If anyone can, it will be him. Scrimar walks away, going back to look over his scattered notes. Handwritten pages of spell arrays and complicated magical formulae decorate his tables. Let's see. Here it is. He grabs one of the pages and returns to the immobilized provost. I've enjoyed our conversation, but I find that it's time for you to be quiet. You won't succeed, Fisher says defiantly. Oh, I already have. Voix stemme. With those words, Scrimar steals the voices of the provosts, unable to speak and unable to move without his orders. They're trapped as prisoners in their own bodies. Fully healed, with a plan in mind, Master Forgeron leads the other 4 members of his strike team onward through the decimated forest. Hardly any trees remain standing after the numerous explosions, and the ground is left barren. With the ability to produce destruction on par or exceeding that of most military forces, Danny is surprised that rogue magicians don't attempt to rule the world as kings in a constant state of upheaval. How could someone like Saddam Hussein, Pol Pot, or Hitler rule against even a child knowledgeable of magic? An experienced mage could reduce an entire enemy's army to ash. She then wonders if perhaps there really are magicians working, unseen as part of every regime, to ensure their stability against such opposition. There's more of Scrimar's magic just ahead, Forgeron says, stopping the others with a hand. Again, his senses warn of traps that the others are completely unaware of. Danny begins to question why Master Forgeron is so distrusted. This magic is far more subtle, but equally dangerous. I need everyone to conjure a bubble of oxygen and form it around each of your heads. Do not apply too much focus, or you will burst it. Apply too little, and the dark magic will penetrate the bubble's skin. What is this magic that you sense? Master Hironda asks. He, too, has begun to put his full faith in Forgeron, as their one chance for success in returning to Endelgion alive. It's an infectious dark magic that, if breathed in, will cause the victim to lose control of their ability to consciously work spellcraft. The infected will randomly release incantations and conjurings, unable to stop themselves. Pure chaos. Master Hironda pauses, having never heard of such a terrible spell. The workings of curses were barred by the Elder Council, and only a select few, including Forgeron, have any training in their use. Being aware of what one may take and having an appropriate response was felt by the Elders a satisfactory need to instruct a handful of masters in the darkest of arts. Forgeron's eyes are trained to see the lingering energy of a released spell and tie it in his mind to known glyphs to determine the most likely candidates for said spell's identity. Following Fordron's instructions, the others craft protective bubbles and make their way through the first patches of trees, untouched by the explosions earlier. Abbott suddenly stumbles, tripping on an exposed tree root. Her concentration interrupted, the protective bubble vanishes, and she slams her face hard against the ground. Blood fills the teen's mouth, and she moans, pushing herself to her feet. "Hold your breath," Fordron orders, quickly drawing forth the sigils to cast a protective replacement over the girl. Fear spreads over Abbott's face as she realizes, too late, she has already been infected by the dark magic. Shaking, she holds her hands over her mouth in an attempt to stifle whatever may emerge. Steam begins to hiss around Abbott's fingers, and she grimaces in pain as searing heat tears at her palms. Unable to bear any more, she pulls her hands away from the heat and emits a belching plume of flame from her mouth. Master Hironda weaves his hands in a rapid and intricate pattern, conjuring a spiderweb of ice extending between the trees. The flames become caught in the ice, reducing both to a large cloud of vapor. Abbott's lungs and mouth burn, and she drops to her hands and knees, coughing and trying to spit up the lingering fire. Suddenly, her back arches, and she is thrown in reverse with a series of violent spasms. Long abrasions materialize across her exposed skin, and dark spots swell out over her clothing from other wounds unseen. The blood pools together beside the girl, who continues to scream in agony. "Help her!" Danny screams, watching her friend in terrible pain. The blood begins to rise and morph into a human-like form. "Damn it!" Fordron whispers. "That is a blood rite. I cannot cast anything that would harm it. Should that clone sustain damage, so will Caitlin." The blood clone begins to take on the more noticeable features of its caster. Waist curving inward, facial textures emerging, faux hair appearing. The blood clone's hands transform into long scythes, and she leaps at the others with high-pitched screams. Targeted first, Danny sidesteps an overhead slash and snaps her foot forward in a powerful retaliatory kick. Her heel connects with the conjuring's sternum, sending it sprawling backwards. Abbott is back to her feet, barely conscious and with tears running down her cheeks. Blood drips from the corners of her mouth, like a rabid animal, salivating. Through no action of her own, she slams her hands together and conjures a thick cloud of wasps. The insects swarm the others, stinging each repeatedly. Succumbing to the pain of the stings and concentrating more on swatting them and maintaining his protective bubble, Drahele's spell also fails. Fearful of having to face two uncontrollable apprentices, Master Fordron darts to Drahele's side and chops the back of his neck with an open palm. The boy crumbles to the ground, out cold. Dodging the blood clone as she lunges with the slash, Fordron throws an arm up to block her at the inside of the elbow and delivers a straight jab to the stomach. Abbott reels back, experiencing the clone's pain. Danny rushes behind the other girl, taking Fordron's lead without explanation, and locks her into a tight sleeper hold. Abbott claws at Danny's arms, but is too weak to break the hold before her oxygen fades, and she too slips into unconsciousness. Setting Abbott down gently, Danny looks around to the two masters for guidance. "What now?" she asks. Part of Danny wishes that the men will decide to abandon the mission and send them back home. After surviving the ordeal with Yamura, kinda, she never imagined that she would have to be right back in the middle of a fight for life or death. Most apprentices spend years of training for missions they are never sent on. Yet within only a few days, Danny is among the last person standing in two separate deadly missions to the human world. Fordron withdraws a return orb from the pack of Drahele and smashes it on the ground beside the two unconscious apprentices. The teens are consumed by smoke and light until they vanish in a strobing flash. Danny is envious of their escape, but her ego is boosted knowing that, other than masters, she alone remains of their team. "They will receive medical attention and be awaiting our return," Fordron says, placing a hand on Danny's shoulder to reassure her. The teenager feels an electric tingle and shudders from the sheer power flowing in and around the man. Can we still win with only the three of us? She asks, looking up into the strong, silvery eyes of the master. Of course. You forget that our task is not to defeat Scrimauer, though if the opportunity arises, we will seize upon it. Our mission is to draw out all of his defenses in order for the stealth team to infiltrate with little resistance. Danny is about to speak again until a crow lands on Fordron's shoulder and dissolves into the darkness of his cloak. She wonders how long the master scout has been roaming ahead of them. We are almost upon our target. Scrimauer is inside a small cabin, surrounded by 4 levels of level 6 barriers. It will take the full efforts of both Master Hironda and myself to bring down his protective shell. Fordron begins. Danny is overcome with terror, knowing the implication of his statement before he finishes. It will be your duty to keep any attacks off of us, so we may maintain our full concentration. You can't expect me to defend all 3 of us against a much more experienced magician's assaults, can you? She shouts accusingly. Fordron merely smiles, moving into place beside Hironda. The 2 masters begin to focus all of their energy into a cloud around them before extending their arms towards the invisible shell surrounding Scrimauer's base. Sweat beads materialize on the arms and faces of the men. Danny takes a deep breath to strengthen her resolve. Masters Fordron and Hironda, how good it is to see you again. How many years has it been? Scrimauer's voice booms from the building, enhanced by a spell to make it louder. I have already had the pleasure of catching up with Master Nando, so it is a joy for me to have this second reunion so soon after. Listening to the man's mocking tone and the casual way he jokes about Master Nando, despite having murdered him, makes Danny's skin crawl. She's astonished that he taught Jake the little of magic that he knows, and is even more surprised that the teen survived such training with such a dangerous man. Surrender now, Adrian. If you do, we can guarantee your life. Refuse, and we cannot be held responsible for the consequences, Fordron shouts. You're in no position to give me ultimatums. I have eliminated your team as handily as I did Master Nando's. Not even Master Arono's team was managed to harm me. Are you really saying that at less than half strength, the 2 of you and 1 rookie can beat me? No matter how many teams the elders throw at me, I will keep sending them back in pieces. Danny wonders if she should act now while Scrimauer is immersed in conversation. She could save time and potential lives if she can manage to take out the rogue in a single swift strike. Should I be frightened by your single remaining apprentice? Scrimauer asks with a laugh, as if sensing Danny's intentions. I have 2 more of yours if you'd like them back. The concentration of the masters briefly slips as they are both caught off guard. From Scrimauer's hideout emerges 2 figures and a chill runs down Danny's spine. The eyes of the people are glazed over and their jaws are slack. She knows instantly they are under some form of magical control. This is how I brought down the previous teams, and how you will also fall. Provost Fisher and Javad throw their arms out and interlock their fingers, fusing their energy into one. Garuda Nostra! They shout in unison, controlling the element of air and harnessing it into a powerful wind that slams into the masters. Danny drops down in front of the masters quickly, placing her palms flat on the ground, and speaking an incantation to raise up the earth and a slab of various rocks. The rocks act as a windbreak and cuts the gale in two. The winds harmlessly blow past the trio, who continue to chip away at the barriers. Javad hops to the side, conjuring a bow of energy and knocking a shimmering arrow of light. Fisher weaves several rapid hand signs, translating the needed pressure, speed, and direction to his partner. The magical arrow is loosed. Danny is forced to erect her own barrier around her and the masters. The arrow pierces the barrier easily, shattering it into thousands of tiny shimmers of light. Danny is knocked to the ground from the impact, but crawls right back to her feet in time to see Javad loosing a second arrow and knocking a third. Aginestra! Danny shouts, controlling the element of fire and drawing it into her own energy. Mixing the two together, she releases them out in a barrage of flaming orbs. The second arrow explodes on contact with one of the orbs, while the rest surround Javad in a fiery ring. Before Danny can capitalize on her hit, two members of Master Nando's team, thought dead, emerge from the cabin to counter her spell. Nixe! They shout. Together their energy is more than enough to cancel out Danny's. Javad does not hesitate, and as soon as she has an opening, she looses a third light arrow. Danny screams as the arrow pierces her chest and vanishes. Her body bounces off the ground and she remains motionless. With Danny put down, Javad releases an arrow after arrow towards the masters. Both magicians grind their teeth together in pain, but stand their ground and maintain their focus as long as they can. Back on her feet, Danny screams and releases a wave of energy from her hands. The energy is a manifestation of her physical, not magical aura, and the magicians are unable to form a counter in time. All four of the puppetry curse-controlled magicians are slammed into the wall of Scrimmar's cabin, pinned up against his barrier and the energy. The controlled mages fall, put out of commission for the moment, and Danny drops to her knees in exhaustion. Go, Scrimmar growls, sending more of his corpse puppets to join the battle and aid the temporarily incapacitated provosts. 5 corpse puppets emerge from the cabin and immediately go on the offensive against the masters as they try to maintain their concentration on the lowering of the protective barrier. In moments, the controlled forms of Provost Javad and Fisher are back on their feet and attacking in unison with the others. Fordron throws his hands out, knocking the controlled Provost back with a pulse of invisible energy. The puppets recover quickly, rushing straight back at the master. Hiranda attacks from the side, encasing Provost Fisher in a block of ice and causing him to drop out of the air. We can't continue to fight them while holding back, Fordron says, tilting his head to avoid a punch from Javad. The master counters with a straight right to the puppet's chest, but she seems oblivious to the pain. Javad retaliates immediately, connecting with a hook across Fordron's jaw. The master spins, releasing sparks of electricity-like energy from his hands into her. Javad's body becomes temporarily paralyzed as the electricity causes her nerves to reboot. They are not in control of their actions, Hiranda shouts, quickly erecting a barrier to block a punch from one of the corpse puppets. We're left with little choice, Fordron replies, hitting the puppet in the back with a pulse of energy. The puppet turns to attack in response, but Hiranda quickly slaps the binding paper on their back. The puppet's eyes roll back in his head, and he drops to the ground like a rock. A recovered Javad lands beside the puppet, tearing the paper from their back before the master can interfere. Hey, he's up to something, Danny shouts, observing Scrimmar through the hole in his cabin roof, where the puppets broke through. Fordron punches Provost Fisher hard in the face, but is kicked in the ribs as he extends his arm by one of the corpse puppets. Hiranda rushes, swatting the puppet out of the air with a powerful backhand. We have to get through that barrier, Hiranda shouts with frustration. Scrimmar stands over the bodies of 4 of Master Nando's fallen teammates, drawing spell arrays on their bare chests with his own blood. The rogue ties his will to their bodies. Arise and serve me, Scrimmar orders, activating his corpse puppet necromancy. 4 new figures dart up from the cabin to surround the masters. The corpse puppets are pale and their eyes are utterly lifeless. They also outnumber the magicians 15-3, counting the 2 still living provosts. More abominations, Hiranda growls with disgust. Master Fordron drops to the ground and runs towards the trees, trying to draw as many of the puppets away as possible. Scrimmar is not fooled by this tactic, and sends only 2 of his corpse puppets, and Provost Javad after him. Damn it, Fordron thinks, weaving between trees and avoiding low-hanging branches. I couldn't draw more of them away. Master, Danny shouts, running across the canopy. Get down! Fordron dives forward just as Danny drops down behind him. Aginestra! Danny unleashes a massive wall of fire ahead of her to consume the puppets. Do not kill them! Hiranda shouts, seeing the flames in the corner of his vision. Javad and Fisher are still alive and under his control. He evades attacks from all sides from the puppets now focused on him. Fisher conjures a sword and tries to plunge it through the master's chest, but he catches the provost by the wrists and delivers a devastating headbutt. "We can't keep this up," Fordron says as Danny helps him to his feet. "We have to be able to concentrate, to lower Scrimmaur's barrier." "I'd help, but I don't know any de-spelling magic," Danny replies. Her flames begin to die down and the puppets press forward. Much to her shock, none of their pursuers have been damaged by her attacks. Javad drops to her hands to the ground and raises a pillar of stone, slamming it into Danny's chest. Danny shouts out, spit and blood spraying from her lips. Her lungs burn as the air is driven from them. Fordron's body erupts into a flock of birds, scattering to avoid the attack. Danny rolls to her stomach and stares up at the sky, struggling to breathe. "Get up!" Fordron shouts from above, reforming his body from the crows. Danny's eyes focus, seeing Javad standing over her. The provost conjures a sword in her hands and plunges the blade downward. Panic overtakes thought, and through instinct alone, Danny blocks the puppet and knocks her to her back with a pulse of energy. She scrambles back up to her feet, chest still on fire. She clutches at her breast, wincing in pain. Javad, too, recovers, but shows no emotion due to having the pain receptors in her brain shut off by Scrimmaur. The provost attempts to use the element of earth once more as a battering ram. Danny throws her hands out as the stone rushes forward. On impact with her hands, she is able to rip the element of life from the conjurer and reduce the attack to a shower of dust. Fordron is shocked to see the girl adapting and improving, even as the battle wages. Able to teach herself on the fly, Danny has learned the first steps of breaking apart spells by removing their component elements. Very few magicians have this kind of natural talent, and he makes a note to himself to follow up on her gifts at a later time after this battle is over. Javad and one of the corpse puppets rush Danny while the other one leaps up to meet Fordron in the air. The corpse puppet swings at the master, but one-on-one the man is much faster. Fordron redirects the puppet's fist with an open palm and places his other against the side of his opponent's head. "Find your peace in the next world," Fordron whispers, reducing the corpse's head to atoms with a pulse of energy from his hand. Danny hops backward, ducking and blocking furious punches and kicks from her two opponents. She suffers a blow to the shoulder that spins her around into a jab to the face. Danny falls back, blood trailing from her nose. Before her back hits the ground, Danny kicks out and breaks the kneecap of the attacker. Slapping her palm to the dirt, she raises her own pillar of stone that slams into their opponents with such force that she hears bones shatter. Both puppets fall to the ground, temporarily stunned. Danny takes the opportunity to run past them back towards the cabin. "Impressive work back there," Fordron says, dropping down beside her. Danny sees that his opponent is nowhere to be seen and can only assume that he's been dispatched. "Don't praise me until we win this," Danny says, turning to prepare for another round with the puppets. Javad and the corpse puppet emerge from the forest, ignoring any damage they previously sustained. From behind, 3 more corpse puppets quickly approach. Danny slides her right foot back into a light fighting stance. "Use your magic," Fordron criticizes. "You'll only tire through prolonged physical combat." "Save the coaching for the locker room," Danny says, blowing him off and launching herself forward. She sidesteps a punch and counters with an open palm strike to Javad's jaw. The corpse puppet snaps a roundhouse kick, but Danny drops low and rises with an uppercut to the chin and lifts him off the ground. The 3 battle across the area, trading vicious blows. Stubborn and hard to teach, but she may be capable of handling herself, Fordron observes. Master Hironda chops a knife hand to the back of Fisher's neck, hitting pressure points in the hope that he'll be affected. The provost recovers quickly, driving a fist into the master's stomach. Hironda pivots, hooking Fisher's arm and flinging him into 2 other puppets. He winces, holding a hand to his abdomen. "I can't keep this up," Hironda worries. He can feel his aging body giving him trouble in maintaining his stamina. His opponents rush in for another assault. Haronda condenses the water molecules in the air into spinning crystals between him and his opponents. Fisher tries to weave around the ice crystals, but Haronda moves one to intercept him. Blood sprays into the air as the crystals slice open a deep gash in the provost's front. The pain doesn't deter him, but the preservation of his puppet causes Scrimar to pull him back and focus on healing magic. The corpse puppets throw their hands out, firing off blasts of Aginaestra fire. The ice crystals explode on contact, filling the air with steam. Haronda rushes through the steam, drawing the ice crystals into his hands. Past his opponents, Haronda's hands are now blanketed by gloves of sharpened ice. 3 of the corpse puppets are unable to even turn, each splitting apart into dozens of meaty chunks. "I am sorry, but I had no other choice," the master thinks with sadness. "This is our chance," he shouts, landing beside Fordron as Danny continues to battle Javad and the 2 corpse puppets, one more having joined in. 4 puppets drop down in front of the masters, but without worry of preserving life in the corpses, the men consume them without hesitation in a massive wave of fire. The corpse puppets are obliterated by the powerful spell that rushes forth with such speed that they're unable to dodge. With a break in the action, the masters step up to the barrier and each takes a deep breath, focusing their energy and minds for the daunting task at hand. The barrier begins to tremble as hairline cracks snake through portions of it. Scrimar is alarmed, watching as the masters quickly work their way through his protective spells, layer by layer, and breaking them apart. "Stop them!" Scrimar screams, focusing all of his attention of his puppets on the 2 masters. Part of the barrier shatters, and Scrimar hurries to try to repair the damage as quickly as they are inflicted. Soon the rogue realizes that he cannot keep up with the 2 experienced masters and runs over to his table. Scrimar begins to flip through his stolen spellbook, frantically searching for the desired ritual page. Grabbing a dagger, he cuts open his palm and begins to draw a complex spell array on the floor with his own blood. "He's preparing to summon something," Haronda whispers, trying not to break his concentration. "One of the saints," Fordron replies. "We can't allow him to finish." He shakes off his seeming trance and looks over to Danny, who is still engaged in combat with Javad and the 2 corpse puppets. "She's going to have to stop him from completing his ritual." "There's no way that she can do that," Haronda protests, pausing from spellbreaking. "We can't expect her to hold her own against a man that has killed master-level mages before in combat. She only needs to keep him occupied long enough for us to break that barrier. Only we can do that. She does not know how to de-spell protective walls. We don't have any other options." The remaining corpse puppets converge on the masters, assaulting them from multiple directions with magical blasts. Haronda erects a protective barrier around them, but the energy shatters after a second volley. The master is blasted to the ground and rolls back over his shoulder, releasing a wave of energy from his own hands that slams into one of the puppets and reduces them to a blur. Fordron grabs the arm of a puppet as it lunges down with a sword strike and drops his other elbow down. The arm is broken, but the puppet pays no attention to the pain or discomfort, and instead delivers a hard right to Master Fordron's face. The blow spins Fordron around and into a sidekick from a second puppet. "Danny, we have our hands full with his puppets. You must stop Scrimar from casting that summoning spell," Fordron shouts, ducking beneath an Aginaestra fire blast, quickly followed by a gust of Garunastra that sweeps the flames into a cyclone. Master Haronda transforms the cyclone into ice that shatters on impact, as Fordron shields his face with his arms. Left open in saving his comrade, Haronda is impaled through the side by Javad's puppet sword. Danny screams out, but the master tells her to go before grabbing the shoulders of the attacking puppet. Haronda headbutts Javad, and then quickly envelops them both in a bright light. Sealing ribbons extend from beneath the master's cloak and wrap tightly around them. Written on the papers are sealing incantations to smother the ability of those bound to cast magic. A second assault of sealing ribbons binds their hands and feet, swallowing all free movement. The 2 of them drop to the ground like stone. Fordron shakes off the impact of the ice, but Fisher and a corpse puppet from Nando's team are immediately on him with a flurry of sword strikes. Danny drops down through the breach in Scrimmire's protective dome, coming face to face with the rogue for the first time. Sizing the girl up, Scrimmire laughs out loud. In her, he sees no real threat, and thinks himself foolish for ever thinking otherwise. This is the best the almighty elders have to throw at me? A teenage girl? An apprentice, no less? I'm actually quite insulted, Scrimmire mocks. A million questions swirl in Danny's mind. Here she has some opportunity to speak with a skilled magician not beholden to the strict laws and ordinances of Endelgian. She wonders how much of the writings of Eliphas Levi would be validated by Scrimmire. She cannot help but recall the elders' threats that they would strip her of her ability to perform magic should they disapprove of her entrance into Dioda's apprenticeship. She wonders about Jake's training with him and the brutal martial artist, Radnovich. Seized with fear, Scrimmire laughs. Allow me to show you something that is truly worthy of fright. Scrimmire returns to his summoning ritual, and Danny knows she must act somehow, but cannot get her legs to respond. She looks down to see her feet are encased in concrete. Even while speaking, Scrimmire is able to cast an unspoken spell to bind her. The mental fortitude of the man is astounding. If there's anything left of you after this, I shall use your body as the newest addition to my puppet collection. Because of your efforts, I'm depleted of most of my former toys, so the ranks must be replenished. When the girl doesn't retort, Scrimmire returns to his summoning with a snort. Honored of the saints, masterful and unequaled, none can compare to your skill or power. Danny must think quickly before the saint is summoned. Very few magicians have ever faced one of the devils known as the saints and lived to talk about it. The Sans Magno are among the highest of the devils and represent each of the cardinal vices. In an attempt to mock the Creator, the saints became the sheer embodiment of the sins he detests. So powerful that they cannot exist in the human world without leading to its destruction. The saints were bound with the deepest and strongest of Yazitan magic. Sorcerers like Scrimmire are able to call forth only a fraction of the beast's power, yet it's still far more than enough to crush all opposition. Come forth, proud Heliorus Buer. Heed my voice and obey. I summon you forth, Scrimmire chants. The ground shakes violently, and a massive, complex spell array manifests across the ground. Dozens of layers of incantations independently spin and unlock like a huge mechanical dial. Flames erupt from the center of the circle, and a clawed hand, easily 5 times larger than that of a human, reaches out for leverage. Steam rises, and a bellowing growl vibrates from the pit. 2 red eyes, larger than a whale's, peer out from the darkness. The creature pulls itself up until it emerges to the waist from the depths. Chains remain covering the beast, reminding all that it is a slave. Heliorus Buer turns its head towards the man who summoned it. You again? No one has killed you yet? Heliorus asks, licking his lips with an unnaturally long and fleshy tongue. How could anyone defeat me when I have the aid of your godlike power? On your back I could storm the gates of paradise and piss on the Creator's feet without fear, Scrimmire says, playing on the saint's massive ego. As the embodiment of pride, Heliorus is arrogant beyond measure and enjoys being flattered in excess. The saint laughs loudly and grins, revealing sword-like teeth in double rows. Resembling a grotesque armored lion, Heliorus is chief of the Sans Magno, and the most difficult to summon. Upon hearing the creature's voice, Fordron goes white with terror. He summoned their leader? That fool! He cannot control Heliorus Buer. Fordron thinks with shock, dodging another flurry of sword strikes. He tries to put the battle below out of his mind. To let his focus slip on the battle at hand will only result in his own death. Fordron drops down as Fisher and the corpse puppet come in for a pair of lunging blows. Dropping out of his cloak, he allows the blades to become entangled, while below them he conjures an orb of explosive energy. Pushing the orb upwards, the blast eradicates the corpse puppet and sends Fisher tumbling to the ground with smoke trailing from his chest. Fordron knows that he will recover. As long as he draws breath and the curse is active, Fisher will remain Scrimmaur's slave. Fordron drops down through the crack in the barrier and lands beside Danny. With the snap of his fingers, the concrete around her feet shatters into sparkles of light. Scrimmaur rolls his eyes, unimpressed. "Another tribute for me?" Heliodorus asks as this new mage enters the battle. "He is a skilled master and someone I once saw as a mentor of sorts," Scrimmaur says painfully. "Kill him slowly and make his suffering drawn out." Fordron tackles Danny, rolling across the floor just as the clawed paw of Heliodorus crashes down upon them. "Pests," the saint growls. He detests opponents who try to prolong their deaths through evasion. Fordron pivots, releasing a barrage of conjured blades into the face of Heliodorus. The saint laughs, admiring the frontal assault much more than the game of chase he had expected. He brushes the knives from his furred mane. None were able to penetrate his thick hide, and caught in his fur. "I hate magicians," he growls, licking his lips. "Arrogant little pests that think themselves important. Really, a human who thinks themselves to be on a level high enough to control one such as I." He looks with an accusatory glare towards Scrimmaur, who tries to ignore the comment. He doesn't wish to play into the saint's dislike of being manipulated. Should he lose control of Heliodorus, his life too would be endangered, perhaps even more so than the others. "What do we do now?" Danny asks as she and Fordron roll back up to their feet, after having evaded another swiping slash of the saint's claws. She can feel the crushing pressure of the beast's aura pressing upon her and finds it nearly impossible to catch her breath. She struggles not to scream out in panic. Fordron touches her shoulder, sensing her trouble, and attempts to comfort the teen. "We still have a mission to accomplish. I don't plan on failing. Do you want the deaths of our team, our friends, to be in vain?" Heliodorus grins, exerting his power and forcing both magicians to their faces flat on the floor. The weight pressed upon them is smothering. The Saint Devil of Pride is able to control the natural force of gravity. "Good of you apes to prostrate yourselves before me. None can deny my superiority." Heliodorus laughs. He raises a finger, lightening the force of gravity on Danny so that she crashes up against the roof. Splinters of wood rain down among the girl's pained screams. Scrimmaur walks over towards the downed master. The rogue places a foot on the center of Fordron's back and stands over him, as if claiming a new land in his name. Heliodorus seems to appreciate the humiliating gesture and snickers. "Master Fordron, you of all people would be the last I would have expected to come here after me. Have you been reined in by the elders? Are you another of their faithful dogs now? Perhaps you always were. Maybe you always have been a manipulator and a liar. Adrian, you must stop this. You don't want to kill us." "Of course I don't want to kill you. If you hadn't sent me to the library that night, I'd never have gained the power to do all of this," Scrimmaur says, extending his hands to boast of his ability to erect such a powerful barrier, construct puppet servants, and summon one of the saints. Heliodorus begins to become agitated, Scrimmaur's cockiness reminding him of his servitude. "O great Heliodorus, please allow Master Fordron the ability to stand." The saint dials back enough gravity for the magician to crawl to his feet. Fordron is amazed at how much control the rogue has over Heliodorus. He suspects that he is able to achieve this by how much he stops to pay respect and compliments to the beast. Apparently the pride of this monster is something that must be stoked to stay in his graces. "Please, Adrian, stop this." "Master Fordron, begging is beneath you. Do not insult us both by lowering yourself to such undignified things. I have always held you in high respect. Do not ruin my fond memories that I have of you." Danny shakily lowers a hand, releasing a pulse of physical energy down towards the rogue. Skrymar turns, clapping the attack between his hands and dispersing it into sparkles of light. Your new apprentice has some spunk, Skrymar laughs before nodding in Heliodorus' direction. The saint acknowledges and smashes the teen back to the floor. She screams loudly as her body is nearly flattened. Blood and saliva explode from her open mouth. Fisher and another corpse puppet drop down through the cracks in the barrier and await further orders. Are there more members of their team in hiding? The rogue asks. His puppets shake their heads in unison. It seems that your plan was sloppy from the get-go and never improved. Ever since you left in Delgian, you have lost team members left and right to me. You are a poor field commander, Master. I remember the missions with you so much differently. The legend of Tor's Fordron has not held up with time. A fuse burns until the ribbons binding Master Hironda are severed. As the sealing enchantments melt away, the crafty magician emerges with a sigh of relief. Having set the fuse in motion just before being sealed away with his own magic, he is forced to wait until it burned through the ribbons and restored his movement. As the sealing ribbons begin to smoke around Provost Javad, Hironda quickly puts them out to leave the puppet magician bound. I promise we shall break this curse. But for now, just rest, Hironda whispers. He looks ahead to Skrymar's cabin and is sickened by the tremendous dark power he feels leaking out. So this is the aura of a saint? Truly horrifying. Heliodorus leans over Danny's body, drooling with delight. The beast picks her up by a leg between his fingers and holds her there, dangling helplessly. Barely conscious, Danny struggles as the blood rushes to her head and complicates her thoughts. Let her go, Adrian. You have no quarrel with this girl. She is nothing to you, Fordron demands. You're absolutely right. She is nothing to me. I don't give one shit whether she lives or dies. She doesn't have the history that you and I share. Your betrayal actually pains me. It was you who first opened my eyes to the truth of the Elder's injustices, and yet now it is your eyes that have closed. She was a pupil of the rogue Elian Schaefer. If you spared her, you could take her on as your own apprentice. She already has the corruption of dark magic in her. She will never walk the line that the Elders demand. Skrymar pauses, contemplating the idea of having his own student to teach and to mold. He looks at the girl's broken form for a long while, staying the hand of Heliodorus. The saint angers at being unable to finish off his prey. It is your experience that would be useful at my side, not this girl's. Together, we could unleash the depths of hell on the Elders and remake Endelgion and the entire world anew. We could finally put an end to their tyranny. Together we could bring justice to the world, Skrymar finally says, looking away from Danny and back to Fordron. The twilight of the Elders is approaching, but their time has not yet come. Your impatience is astounding and a detriment to your own success, Fordron says. Insulting me, even at the brink of your death? You never cease to surprise me, Master. He pauses again, trying to decipher the Master's ever-cryptic words. He believes that deep down, Fordron still believes in the necessity of tearing down the old system, and replacing it with one built upon the ideals of freedom and unburdened by oppression. He cannot, however, figure out why Fordron continues to defy and stand against him. They should be brothers in arms in this struggle, not pitted against each other for the amusement of the cold and uncaring Elders. Master Hironda stands outside the cabin, chanting the incantations needed to bring down the barrier. Skrymar notices his energy waning, and concern rises within him. He sends his puppets to investigate. One of their team has escaped our notice. Kill them immediately, Skrymar shouts, sending out Fisher and another corpse puppet. The puppets leap up, just as the surrounding energy dissipates. Sealing papers dart out from seemingly nowhere, encasing them in binding magic and removing the threat from the battle. Both puppets drop to the ground inanimate, and bound by many layers of enchantments. Distracted, Skrymar turns back towards Fordron just as the Master spins with a palm-sized blade in his hand. The rogue leaps back, blood dripping from his forearm. The final barrier is down, Fordron shouts, dropping to his own knees. Bastard! Scrimauer curses, cradling his wound. Kill him! Heliorus grins, tossing Danny aside, and moves towards the greater challenge of the master. Fordron too smiles, holding up the blade that now glistens with the blood of Adrian Scrimauer. Not today, beast, Fordron says, holding his hands out and revealing a spell array, drawn with Scrimauer's blood on his palm. The spell array glows brightly. Only the blood of the summoner may dismiss a saint. Heliorus roars loudly, furious to be sent back to the depths. I will get my hands on you one day, magician, Heliorus Ware howls as his body vanishes into the pit before the ground flattens back to normal, and no trace of a hellhole remains. The entire time you were speaking with me, you were working on a plan to dismiss Heliorus, Scrimauer observes with equal anger and admiration. He laughs once uncomfortably, knowing he has been outsmarted. Summoning a saint consumes an enormous amount of stamina, and as such, is typically saved for a last resort. The only option now remaining is to take Fordron out with a death curse. He may not have the energy left to escape afterwards, but at least he will have the satisfaction of eliminating his biggest threat. Before Scrimauer can cast his spell, Master Kerr Seme and his team of 5 knight self-operatives erupt through the wall behind him. The rogue turns to face the opposition, but is immediately struck down by a powerful blow from Master Seme's sword. Blood sprays out from Scrimauer's shoulder, and he forgets all else but pain. Dropping into a regenerative healing trance, Scrimauer attempts to stop the bleeding and close up his wound before he too becomes too weak. The stealth team quickly binds the rogue and all 4 of his puppet magicians in level 8 bindings, with their hands tied and their mouths covered to prevent any casting. Their eyes are even taped down so they are unable to close them and mentally visualize the symbols needed for spellcraft. Fordron walks away as Scrimauer is sealed away in a cocoon of restrictive magic. Barriers powerful enough to bind even a saint render the rogue magician completely immobile, bending to retrieve the stolen book. Fordron finally lays his hands on a book that he's waited years to touch. Master Fordron, are you injured? A knight asks, approaching him as they secure the area and search for any more threats. I'm fine. See to Apprentice Livingston's wounds. The knights nod and jog off to find and heal Danny. Master Hironda approaches. It seems that we were able to pull off a miracle after all, Hironda says with a cough, holding his ribs in pain and wincing. Fordron smiles. Yes, it appears so. Your timing could not have been more perfect. I could not have continued stalling much longer. I could feel the saint slowly resisting Adrian's control. In a short time, he would have become too weak to keep the creature subdued. Hironda glances at the ancient tome in Fordron's hands. Is that what he used to summon the saint? Reluctantly, Fordron hands the book over to him and nods. Now is not the time to draw suspicions to myself, he thinks. It's a very dangerous book of the darkest arts. In the hands of a rogue such as Scrimauer, we're lucky more destruction was not caused. We must take extra precautions to guard this in the future, so that no other impressionable youth becomes twisted by its dark powers. Fordron grinds his teeth together, watching his moment slip away with no chance of preventing it. Yes, that would be tragic. The knight helps Danny to her feet, her wounds healed. She's amazed by how things turned out. Several times she thought for sure they were going to be killed. The miraculous save by the stealth team is beyond words to her. Well done, Master Seme says to Danny, exiting the cabin as his team uses return orbs to transport their prisoners back. You have the courage and talent to one day become a great elder, or knight in the Order of Solomon. Danny returns to the side of Masters Fordron and Hironda, who are sitting up under the recovering glow of 2 stealth team members' Dukan Hellas spells. As expected, you did not disappoint, Fordron says with a tired smile. I knew that you were more than capable of not only keeping up, but also contributing to our mission. I don't need my ego stoked, Master. I was more of a detriment. Had you not had to swoop in and try to save me from the saint, you could have lowered the barrier yourself, and the stealth team could have infiltrated much quicker. Is that what you think? Fordron laughs. If it were not for you, Scrimauer would have been free to focus his full attention and power on me. I would not have had the opportunity to stop him or his saint. So I played a good sparring dummy for Aslan from hell. Yay, Team Danny, she sighs. None of the other members of our team would have been capable of standing their own for as long as you did. Can you not see that out of the entire team, only you remained, alongside two masters? It was not through our interference that you persevered. If anything, our presence held you back from your full potential. No, Danny. One day you're going to accomplish great things, Master Hiranda says, smiling. And I think that day won't be too long waiting. He's right, Fordron adds. You were very impressive, and you lived up to all of my expectations. I touted your ability highly, and now all will see that my faith in you is not misplaced. The teleportation tower Adrian Scrimauer. The knights awaiting their return quickly arrange in formation, drawing their weapons in the slim chance that it is not those who set out from the mission that are returning, but possibly the rogue magician. From the light, many figures materialize. Several of those returning are bound by sealing papers and are completely immobilized. A single person is encased in a magical tomb and stabilized by 3 members of the stealth team. Glyphs on the tomb prevent the prisoner from casting any magic or moving his arms or legs. The bodies of Danny's fallen comrades are laying out to be given a proper burial. Teenagers close to, or actually were the same age as her, will now never again wake up to see another day. Friends, family, classmates, they'll never see any of them again. It's sobering to think that it could be just as easily her rather than them. Nothing more than blind luck separates Danny from those lifeless bodies in her mind. One of the knights steps forward, casting a spell to give himself the sight to see any traces of controlling magic. Shirio! Only those currently wrapped in sealing papers exhibit any signs of being under control. Welcome back, Masters, Captain Arisai says as he and Lieutenant Nando approach. It was touch and go many times, Master Hiranda replies. Good magicians paid the ultimate price for this victory. Fordron hands Akanzi the book, much to the captain's surprise. This is the source of Scrimauer's power. See to it that it's safely returned to where it belongs. Vadis smiles upon seeing that Danny is alive and well. He was worried that her lack of experience would have gotten her seriously injured or killed. Instead, she is one of the few magicians left standing by her own strength. Surprised to see me again? Danny asks with a smile, noticing the lieutenant's look. Guess now you'll have to take my word that I can handle myself. I'm glad you're unhurt. That was a mission that even masters had reason to fear. Apprentice Livingston handled herself in battle far better than any of her rank I've ever before seen, Fordron says, putting a hand on the girl's shoulder. I'm quite jealous that she's to be taught by Master Deoda. She would make an incredible Blackwing. Thank you, Master, Danny says, embarrassed by his kind praises. I was worried I was only getting in the way. Nonsense. You are a key component to our victory. Each of us played vital roles. If any of us had failed, none of us would have returned home alive. I should have killed that little whore with my own hands, rather than wasting the time in summoning Heliorus, Scrimauer growls from his tomb. Shut up, prisoner, a knight says, kicking the tomb. Go fuck yourself. You're all just puppets of the elders and their establishment. None of you have a free thought in your heads. Can you cast some kind of silence on him? Danny asks, rubbing her temples. He doesn't shut up. Wish I could, but no magic can exist within the confines of his tomb. A skilled magician can break apart a simple spell and use the component energy to rearrange into their own magic. The ability to cast alone is dangerous in the right hands, Fordron says. Get him to his cell, Vadis orders. We'll deal with him later. Little Nando, is that you? My, you've grown. The resemblance between you and Cyril is amazing. Oh, I apologize. Make that was amazing. Vitus lunges for the tomb in anger. The instant it takes him to reach the target, the lieutenant has already drawn his blade and enchanted it with the glowing glyphs of barrier breaking. Stand down! Akanzi shouts, drawing his own sword. Quicker, and clashing with Vitus on the younger magician's downward swing. Do not put any more lives at risk out of anger. He has been defeated and can do no more harm to us. Let the elders dole out his punishment. Red-faced and still breathing heavily, Vitus sheathes his weapon in submission. He put you in your place, didn't he? Scrimmeyer laughs. Vitus' teeth grind together in fury, and his superior orders his men to take the prisoner away. Lock our guest in the detention towers. Ensure all proper barriers are placed on the door and interior of the cell, Akanzi orders. 4 knights carry the tomb away, taking the rogue magician Adrian Scrimmeyer to his prison. Are you okay? Danny whispers, trying not to draw a lot of attention to the already embarrassed Vitus. Yeah, I just need to cool off. I'll meet up with you later. Sure, she replies with a nod. God knows I could use a long soak and a hot bath. I have blood and swamp water caked on my skin so thick it feels like armor. Danny, if you're able, I would like for you to come by the barracks tomorrow. It's important for all of the team to go over our successes and failures in the mission, for closure and improvement, Fordron says. She agrees, looking forward to seeing the others after they have recovered. The memory of those they lost still strongly stings, but she hopes that together they can persevere. The procession of knights, bearing Adrian Scrimmeyer's sarcophagus, passes by like some macabre parade. Maxwell watches with the other magicians of Endelgium with fascination. The rogue has become legendary after his avoiding capture for so many years and learning how to summon the saints. Scrimmeyer sees the attention of the young magicians fixed upon him, like some dark celebrity, and he winks, grinning as he enjoys the attention. Smug bastard, Vitus growls, walking behind the procession with Captain Erisai and Master Fordron. He's captured and still acts like he has us exactly where he wants. He managed to put our entire society in turmoil. Even the elders feared what should happen if he were to launch an attack with the saints. As someone who obviously craves chaos, Scrimmeyer achieved just what he desired, Fordron explains. I wouldn't say that the results were completely according to his plans, Akanzi argues. He wished to tear down and replace our society. He failed in that aspect. Perhaps, Fordron says, thinking deeply. Or he merely wished to plant the seeds of discord among our number. Maybe he sees himself as a herald of the true reformer to come. Do you think he intended to plant doubts within the members of your team he was able to control as puppets? Vitus asks in concern. They were separated from us for hours, Fordron replies. I cannot say with certainty what transpired during that interval. Maxwell jogs to catch up with the trio at the rear of the procession to hear more about the mission and the rogue himself. Fordron notices the provost's awe of the prisoner and shakes his head with annoyance. Did you really see him summon the saints? Maxwell asks, his eyes enlarged. The saints are vicious creatures, beyond even the depravity of common devils. They're the boogeymen that the boogeyman checks underneath his bed for at night, Fordron says coldly. It should not be such an event that would garner your hero worship. All 7 of them? Maxwell asks, undeterred. Fordron sighs, seeing that he will not win. So he claims, yet I only witnessed the summoning of Heliorus Buer. Master Nando also reported battling against Vidatu and Bomlehe. At the very least, we know him to be capable of summoning 3 of the saints, with the ability to bring out 2 simultaneously. He learned all of that on his own from a single book? Wasn't he just a provost when he left? Fordron nods. He was a gifted mage, but nothing really spectacular. The lieutenant here would have ran circles around him at the same age. Vitus is still consumed by anger and grief to acknowledge the compliment. But it was the book, right? The book gave him that kind of power? Fordron glances at the ancient tome being carried by Captain Arisai and grinds his teeth in anger, knowing the power of the book and wishing it for himself. Yes, Master Fordron finally says, trying to mask his anxiety. There is a reason some books are kept locked away. No one should ever have access to a cookbook for summoning the worst monsters our world has ever known. So why aren't books like that just destroyed when they're found? It seems like an obvious answer, but it's far more complicated. Both the elders and Fordron know the slippery slope those kinds of actions would initiate. In our past, cultures have destroyed books and historical remnants of those they have believed to be evil or immoral. When the Romans destroyed the library at Alexandria, Egypt, so much ancient knowledge was lost forever. The Persians repeatedly destroyed the religious writings and temples of the ancient Hebrews and other local groups they saw as dangerous. Even in modern times, the Catholic Church and zealot dictators within the Muslim world destroy whatever they cannot keep hidden from the masses. Thousands of scrolls and statues were demolished by the regimes in Iraq just in this last decade. Before them, the Nazis burned more books than are contained within the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. We cannot begin down that path, for where does it end? What if one of us believes a book to be dangerous while another does not? Culture adapts and changes, and things we once feared are now looked upon as foolish superstition. Should it still be destroyed if it is no longer viewed as dangerous in a modern era? Say that an elder is against homosexuality. Several of our books contain rites written for homosexual magicians to perform alone or together with a partner. Some of us do not see intimate magic between anyone as harmful so long as no one is hurt. But what if that elder sees the very existence of homosexuality as evil? He will see any books relating to such a topic worthy of being destroyed out of fear of propagating the material. Where does it stop? What about spells written with racial or cultural identities in mind? Do you see the danger of this kind of censorship? What if a book was written that contains valuable information contained nowhere else in the archives, but was written by a known murderer, or a white supremacist, or a dark magician? Does all of their writings become negated through their lifestyles or their unrelated decisions? Maxwell had never thought of these matters in such a profound and complicated manner. He nods in understanding. Because we cannot destroy any knowledge, lest we set the precedent to destroy it all, we merely keep what a consensus agrees upon to be dangerous as locked up. Special permission is required to see these protected tomes, but they are not destroyed. Akanzi is impressed to hear that Fordron has matured in his beliefs. The captain has always thought the master to be arrogant and selfish, but he has gained much insight into the complicated man's mind today, and formed a different view of him altogether. Master, I believe it is best that you keep an eye on the provosts, Javad and Fisher. I have confidence in our healers, but we still do not know the full extent of Scrimmaur's increased abilities. It is quite possible that he's been able to design a control spell that can manifest at a later time in order to avoid our detection, Akanzi says. Fordron nods. A proverbial Trojan horse. If the provosts are still under some form of control, they could be intended for releasing Scrimmaur from his magic-proof prison cell. And then he would be free to carry out his plans to tear down this city and rebuild it in his image. Our fears are aligned. Scrimmaur would fail, of course. He is far outnumbered, and with the masters and knights joining in the battle, not even the saints could turn the tide for him. The damage he could do in the meantime would no less be astronomical. We would possibly never be able to fully recover from attacks such as that. They reached the gates of the barracks of the Knights of Solomon and are admitted after showing their tattoos and being scanned for control magic by sensory knights. Maxwell is politely blocked, much to his surprise. I'm sorry, but only fully cleared personnel are being allowed inside today. There is so much going on that the training grounds will be closed, Akanzi explains to the surprised and offended young man. I'll talk to you tomorrow, Maxwell, Bada says. We'll try to work on some conjuring some more. Maxwell storms off and back to his own dormitory, upset that again he's been left out of the special privileged club of the Knights of Solomon. Scrimmeyer smiles as he senses the anger and resentment rising from the young man in waves. Still making friends everywhere you go, Scrimmeyer laughs with sarcasm. That boy could be the next me in the works if you aren't careful. Shut up, Adrian, Scrimmeyer growls. We've had enough of your mind games to last us a lifetime. Don't be so sensitive, the rogue continues to laugh. I'm just trying to help you guys out. You obviously have a serious problem keeping your youth satisfied here in the city. In the forest outside Scrimmeyer's cabin, the rogue magician's eyes continue to watch. The link between Scrimmeyer and his conjured raven is severed by his blocked abilities, but the bird remains nonetheless. Unable to report, the bird watches and waits.